ICQ Podcast, episode 370, HamPi. Well, hello and welcome, fellow Amateur Radio enthusiasts, to this, our 370th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Darryl McCarthy, VK6 Delta Mike Charlie, Mr. D Renton, and the Appledore and District Radio Club, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Chris, Mike Zero, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike Zero, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, K4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, and Leslie, Golf Zero Charlie India Bravo, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin, M6BLY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a review of HamPi. Well, as always, it's your very kind donations that keep the ICQ podcast advert free and helping us pay our way here on the internet. This episode, we'd like to thank Darryl, VK6 Delta Mike Charlie, and he says, thanks for your interesting and fun show. He's new to the hobby after being in the electronics industry for around 40 years. He went straight to an advanced license and is now finding his way through the different modes. I'd like to thank our friend Phil, VK6 Alpha Delta Foxtrot, for all the help he gave me when I was studying for the license and setting up the hotspot so I could talk on the ICQ talk group. Thanks to Martin for his support when I spoke to him on the talk group, as he was my first overseas contact, second of all time. I feel the talk group is a great asset and really appreciate the time everyone's put in to make it work so quickly. Looking forward to the next show. So thank you very much, Darryl, for your very kind support. Mike, Golf 4 Kilo X-Ray Quebec, sent in a donation on behalf of the Appledore District Radio Club, with thanks for the show and for a talk given by Martin back in the summer. So really do appreciate you supporting us, Mike. And Mr. D Renton also set up a subscription donation to us as well. No message or call sign yet, but we might pick that up in the next show. But as I say, those subscription donors are really important to help us generate a base, as I say, to pay our way every single month. Now, you can do what Darryl, Mike, and Mr. Renton have done and showed the value you find in the ICQ podcast by doing a very simple thing. Enjoy the show, turn the enjoyment into a monetary value, and then go along to icqpodcast.com/donate, where you can take one of the options or send in your own value into the show. And as I say, that helps us keep ourselves advert free and paying our way here along on the internet, which is a fantastic thing for you to do. Right, well, let's move on with the show. We're going to join Martin, Chris, Martin, Frank, Bill, and Leslie to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including conviction for racism and the inventor of APRS goes silent key. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, this is episode 370 of the ICQ podcast, and tonight we're recording the news roundtable for that episode. I'm joined tonight by Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Martin. Episode 370, marching towards episode 400.
It certainly is.
Soon, won't we? I guess this time, I'm guessing sometime this year, but 400 episodes. Wow. We'll count down to that one.
Just over a year, because we did 26 a year. So
26 a year. Sorry, yeah, of course. Yeah, okay. So, yeah.
So we're getting there, though, Chris. Getting there. Right.
Just over a year to go.
Yeah. Also in the UK, I have Mr. Martin Rothwell, who is probably going to get me into trouble at some point in time today.
20 episodes to go. Hello. I will do my best to get in trouble, but you don't need my help for that. You just need Mr. Coffee. That sorts the problem out.
Now, if there's a company called Mr. Coffee, I will say he's not advertising.
I'm not advertising them as like Mr. Cup of Coffee. Like
you're definitely not advertising.
Yeah,
no, not intentionally anyway. Like, if I have advertised someone, like one, by all means, send me a check. That's absolutely fine. But two, other brands are available.
Yeah,
you'd have to be Joe DiMaggio to advertise Mr. Coffee.
Okay, still in the UK then, let's say hi to Leslie.
Good evening, Martin.
Hi, Leslie.
I'm just trying to contain myself because I know the in-joke and our listeners don't.
Oh, dear, no.
We've got the sound effects, Leslie, if you want them.
No, it's all right.
Coffee or beer?
Let's move to the other side of the pond and bring the guys in. We also have Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH.
Hey, listen, good to be here. And you can tell we're in a happy mood. Why? Leslie Butterfield is with us.
We're always in a happy mood, but Leslie makes it even happier. And last but not least, we have Mr. Bill Barnes, a WC3B. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Martin. Hi, everybody. Good evening. And good evening to Leslie.
We're going to have some fun tonight, I can tell. Why not, Leslie? Oh, come on. We'll have some fun. Right, let's look at our first news story. And for fairness, over quite a few episodes over the years, we have mentioned people who have been caught in other countries abusing the airwaves. So I don't condone this in any way, shape or form, but a gentleman in a village called Rye, I believe it's in Kent, was convicted for making racial remarks over amateur radio network. Now, we think that this amateur radio network could be a little bit vague, but Chris, what do you think?
Well, yeah, this one's in the mainstream press, so they haven't quite got, we're not quite sure. The details aren't really there about exactly what communication medium was used. It talks about CB radio, it talks about amateur radio. It doesn't go into any detail. It's not really detailed about that. But this is a guy, 61 years old, in that part of the world, south of England, was convicted of a charge of committing racially aggravated harassment without violence when he appeared at Hastings Magistrate Court on January the 19th. And he was convicted and he was given a restraining order, a community order, and an unpaid work requirement of 80 hours and fines totaling £180. So basically, he's been done. Now, the reason this is of interest is because, A, this is someone doing something naughty on the radio, which sadly does happen. And I don't condone this. I'm sure no one on the podcast does. This is, someone doing something pretty horrible. But this is the first time I've seen in the UK someone actually being prosecuted for doing something on the radio that they shouldn't. Now, interestingly, the news story talks about the police being involved. There's no mention of Ofcom or other authorities. This is a police matter. So maybe they're the ones that have taken the lead on this one and brought the charge. This went on apparently over a number of months. In fact, it was between last March and June in 2021. So a number of racial remarks were made over, it says on here, radio networks. And it looks like he targeted a particular person who was disabled. But yeah, for me, it's just that this is the first time I've seen this happen in the UK. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's. I think the chief. This is probably a police matter. If it was racial abuse, and probably needs to be. But yeah, you're right, because normally people don't get prosecuted.
And it doesn't mention anything about his license. If he doesn't mention his license or not anywhere, but if he is, it doesn't mention anything about perhaps having his license taken away or anything around that, or having equipment taken away. It may have happened. It's not clear from the story if that hasn't happened or not. But I would have thought if the regulator was involved, they'd be pressing to get his license revoked. I would have thought for this sort of offence.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, they've lumped in amateur radio CB and pretty much every other means of radio together and called it amateur. So we're not knocking CBers or anybody. It's an individual that's caused this problem. Martin, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'm hoping this news story is, they say he's been prosecuted. And I'm hoping that this is all closed. But if that's the case, good. There's no room for racism in this world. I know it happens. I don't condone it, but there is no room for it. It says it's happened over an extended period of time. That's not just racism. I've got news for you. There's a word for that. It's called bullying. And as someone that got bullied at school, it's not nice. And if anybody does it, I've got absolutely no time for you at all. Sadly, it does happen. We know it happens on the internet. There's lots of trolls and things that hide behind fake Twitter accounts and other social media platforms and things like that. And amateur radio, whether it's amateur, whether it's CB, whatever, it's a way of doing it to some extent anonymously, isn't it? It's very difficult sometimes to prove it. Alas, even our own repeater has at least one user that regularly broadcasts racist comments. Fortunately, majority of people just ignore him. I've had words several times and he's tried to convince me that they're true. And I'm like, I'm not having this conversation, but please stop doing it. Otherwise, we will be returning the tapes over. Part of me wonders, what happened to get the police involved? Did the victim make a complaint to get them involved? Someone listening? Excuse me, I'm suffering from man flu at the moment. Did someone listening get in touch with the police or provide extra evidence? I don't know, but either way, hopefully it's an example to the rest, whether it's over the airwaves, whether it's on the internet or what, that bullying, as this basically is, should be stamped out. It's not on. Whether if you don't like someone, don't talk to them. It's as simple as that. Just walk away. It's not difficult.
Yeah, certainly is. And if it's the person I think it is you're talking about on our repeater, it depends whether he's had his medication or not. If he ain't had his medication, he can be a bit strange. Leslie, still a UK story. So before I pass it over to the States, what do you think?
Well, everything that I wanted to say has already been said. One other thing, and I'm going to have a correction on this one. He's not a gentleman, Martin. I was fuming when I read it, because this is not the way people in this hobby behave. No, we don't do that. He got fined. He's been prosecuted. Hopefully he'll learn his lesson, and we'll move on. It's not nice. And everything that's everyone else has said, I fully concur with.
Yeah, I think the problem is that I'm not going down to his level.
Nah.
He should come up to mine. Well, when I refer to him as a gentleman, I'm expecting him to raise his game. He'll do his punishment, fine. And then he is effectively, once he's done his punishment, he should start with a clean slate. And hopefully he will have learned from that.
Because that's the way our system works.
That is. Frank, does it work any different in the States? I know that, the FCC take equipment away and impose mega fines, don't they?
They do. The volunteer monitoring program in the U.S., as our listeners probably well know, we've talked about that, and I've certainly been part of that. We have an official memorandum of understanding with the FCC to collect forensic evidence, and I've been involved with some of that here in the past week. Now, we have different laws in the U.S. and in parts of the U.K., I'm sure, and we have our famous freedom of speech in our Constitution amendments. So, to some degree, the policy that the FCC has taken is that it has to be very, very extreme. And with the VM program, we try not to look at the content unless it is, making threats. If you threaten the president or, some public official, sure, there would be some report of that. And I'm sure you'd go to Homeland Security. But in crime in general, having taught many criminology students in my statistics classes over the years, what strikes me about this story is that you have things that happen. You have stop signs that people run a lot. And usually when there's an accident or something, the officials then want to make an example and they'll try to catch people and they'll, publicize it. Hey, stop at stop signs. You can kill people. One got killed. Don't do it. So what I'm guessing is that this was, as the other presenters have said, something that had gone on for some time, as stated in the story. But I suspect there's other incidents of this. And so this is sort of, hey, we're putting our foot down administratively in terms of the law. So, there's no place for it, even though people make places for it, unfortunately. So personally, I'm delighted that the court took the actions that it took. They documented it and they've convicted him. And so what, his penalty is, one person could say he got too much. Another one could say he got too little, but he got what the court gave him. And I agree with you that if there is any sense of rehabilitation, that once you make a mistake like this, you're out in the media, you're going to be known as someone who did this, then hopefully he can be rehabilitated and just not do it again.
Yeah, that would be the hope, Frank. That would certainly be the hope. So, yeah. Bill, I'm sorry we've probably left you a little bit out in the cold on this, but you had any first-hand experience of a repeater abuse or this sort of thing?
No, actually, we've been lucky over the years. We had some people that nobody liked to talk to, but that wasn't abuse. But aside from the joke, no, I think Frank correctly described how things are in the States here. Yeah, some people would wish that we did a little more, but the framework that's available for the FCC to work with is pretty limited. But they do eventually get to the worst ones. It just takes a lot of time. And that, like Frank said, it is getting better with the volunteer monitoring program.
Well, that's good news. That's good news. Okay, well, let's hope the man learned his lesson. And, we should, if he's learned his lesson, then and behaves himself, then we should welcome him back. If he hasn't, well, the authorities will obviously sort him out again. All right, let's move to our next news story. Foundation online training statistics. Our friends down there in Essex Hams have just put out some new statistics on what's been happening over the last year. Frank, you're big into statistics. What do you think on this one?
Very, very impressed. And Martin, in general, with all of the things that have gone on in the United Kingdom, particularly in England during the COVID pandemic, with the invigilation and just amazing response. This is just another part of that. Of the 9,200 and so course inquiries that were received, 7,600 enrolled in a course. That's about 82%. I can't imagine any other program being disappointed with that number. And I think most would be very happy. I'm delighted that they're collecting data. That's one of the big problems with programs, is that when you don't have participation data, it's hard to judge how effective they are. I'll let the other presenters have a turn at it. I'm just very pleased with what I'm seeing with the Foundation online courses.
Yeah, certainly are, Frank, and I think it's a real good one. Bill, not wishing to keep you out in the cold too long as we did last time. I know this is in the UK, but this has got to be a success story, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, if every one of them of the 7603 enrolled, if they eventually take a test here and get the bulk of them into the hobby, it's great. And this is just seems to be a trend with this Essex Hams group. They continuously have a lot of outreach, and I deeply appreciate it.
Yeah, the Essex Hams boys not only do training, but they also do a lot of other things for the hobby. So, they do all sorts of things. They run Morse courses and boot camp, Morse boot camp, and all sorts of things throughout the year. So they're a very, very active group. And yeah, you've heard at least one of them on here as a guest presenter, Pete Sipple, when we did Do We Need to Rebrand the Hobby? So Pete and I often caught giggling at rallies. Aren't we, Martin?
Do you want me to play it? Oh, I have those sound bites of, yeah, it's all good fun because Martin very often gets his tongue tied when he's trying to introduce Pete. And Pete often says, just a reminder, Martin, this is my name. And Martin then probably completely pronounces it completely wrong. That's how he says, rhymes with this. And, oh, Martin, bless you. I've got to say, credit to Essex Hams. They should be held in example of how things need to be done. I'm not saying there's any one right way of doing things in the world with clubs and things like this, but Essex Hams have a formula for success. Whatever they're doing, they're going to be somewhere near the top. We've called them out. We did a presentation up at the RSGB convention a couple of years ago, and they were one of the groups that we called out as being out there and doing things. I look at it, 7,603 people enrolled on a course. how many passed. I'd be interested to see how many actually passed that course and how many went and subsequently got their license as a result. But I mean, even if half that amount of people that did the course went and got their license or went and bought a radio after that, that's massive kudos to these guys. And it's, I hope that they're leading. The example will be followed by other people and in other clubs, and give them an incentive to do that in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah. And I can get Pete's name right, honest. It's Pete Sipple, right? Great guy.
Lovely guy, genuinely lovely guy.
Yeah. Right, let's ask Leslie, what do you think? Because you're an Essex person, but I'm not sure if you're a member of Essex Hams.
I am on Essex Hams. Yes. My call sign's on there, and people can send me emails and bits and pieces when they do that. And as for Essex is actually just down the road from me. We're on the wrong side of Essex because Epping Forest and Gilware Park, that's just down the road. So, fame for scouting. Yes, it's like the numbers here. Let's just go through them again. 9,286 calls inquiries and 7,603 enrolled. To put it simply, that's a success. And well done to Essex Ham on that. I'm absolutely sure that there's going to be a high percentage of pass rates on the foundation course. And then from that, people will then go to the intermediate, and then some will even go to the full license. Well done. I think it's absolutely great. And obviously, COVID has we've had to go down this route because of COVID, and that's very unfortunate. But I think this is a shining example that has come out of what's occurred. Well done, Essex Ham. Big thumbs up from me.
Yeah, we agree with you on that one, Leslie. Chris, final word on this one?
Yeah, well, kind of what Leslie was saying, really. So this is a great success story. And it's very much around what's happened as a result of COVID. A lot of things going online now. I mean, certainly myself, and Martin, you and I ran a number of courses over the years for the foundation and intermediate exams, and we haven't been able to do that because of COVID. And we have seen a huge upturn in number of licensees over the last couple of years, and that's due in part to the fact you can now take your license online, and because you can get online training. And Essex Ham, I know of at least 2 or 3 people that have joined the club that have taken their foundation license thanks to the hard work of the guys at Essex Ham. So I think it's a big success story.
Yeah, I think it's a great success story. And if you take what Essex Hams have done, what some of the others have done, the RSGB and their online training and some of the things, we must have had a massive input into the hobby. But my only concern, guys, now is use the airwaves. Get on the air. At the start of COVID 2 years ago, you couldn't get on a repeater. There was always somebody available. It's dropped off, and I've been busy and not been on as much as normal. But with all these new people, they need talking to bring them into the hobby. So, keep them active, and it's good that we have this extra people. Right. Next news story. It's something that's been going on for some time now, but Parks on the Air, ham radio in the press. And there's a gentleman, Paul Brandit, W8PAB, has just been recognised by the local paper. Bill, what's your thoughts on this one?
This is my favorite story of this week by far. It's a real feel-good story about local paper taking interest in the fact that Paul's been activating some parks around his area. Some folks asked some questions, and he gave a really good brief interview as to the overview of what Parks on the Air is and what ham radio is. And it's just a great ambassadorship. and he does say in the article that he does get stopped quite a bit, and he explains what's going on to everybody that asks him. And I like it. I like it a lot. That's, a lot of times we get these articles and it paints amateur radio in a very bad picture in these newspaper articles and stuff. But this one looked really good, and I appreciate Paul taking his time to work with the folks at the local newspaper to get this article out.
Yeah, I agree with you, mate. And it's nice that we get, yes, this is publicity in the mainstream publicity, but each and every one of us can do the publicity when we're out operating and the general public go by. So that's a good one. Frank, I know you go out with a group and operate in the field. Do you do parks as well?
We have begun to do parks, and it's a lot of fun. Not all parks are official POTA classification parks, just like if you do, contact every country in the world, and not just countries, and some of them are reefs and what we might consider odd entities. So not all of the parks. I lived adjacent to a large park that is state controlled. I'm there, several times a week, and it's on a big lake where we live, but it's not a POTA entity. And I've tried to get them to add it, but it's a little bureaucratic thing, but that's a side trip. What I really like picks up on Bill's comments. There's a famous or infamous, as the case may be, cartoon and video of the television character Herman Munster, the fake weird family of vampires and others. And he's a ham radio operator. And that's often the image that we hams have today, the weird guy in the basement. Well, here's an elderly gentleman who looks about as normal as any other elderly gentleman in a park. He's doing something a little different. Well, who goes to parks? Well, a lot of different people go to parks, not just the elderly. A lot of young people, a lot of middle-aged people go to parks. So he's in a place where he's going to be exposed to quite a range of individuals. And he gets a unique opportunity. He gets to present himself as just a normal bloke who's out enjoying the outdoors. And oh, by the way, he may be talking to somebody in the next state, across the country, maybe on the other side of the world if the conditions are right. And he gets to present amateur radio in a way that advertising won't do, because it's just an everyday interaction. And hey, he's got an iPad to log his contacts with. What's weird about that? So I'm very positive about it.
Yeah, I think it's. I think Parks on the Air is something that is great. I mean, I jest, and this is a real jest. I have a park at the back of my house, which is like 2 seconds walk out the back gate. But it's only the size of about 4 football pitches or soccer pitches, Frank. So I don't think that'll ever be on POTA. But hey, whatever you do and wherever you go out and operate, it's got to be good fun. Leslie, have you any thoughts of doing Parks on the Air, and what do you think about this guy doing it?
Well, I actually clicked on the link, and it's a park, but it's a beautiful location. He's got like a lake. It looks like a lake in the background, so certainly somewhere where I would take my sandwiches and a flask of coffee, and it looks a lovely location. I think it's a good story, and he's getting the hobby out there to people. And I'm glad when he said he only had 10 contacts, because what that means to me is he's talking to people and he's explaining the hobby to them. I mean, far too many times I see radio amateurs sort of crouched over their radio and not talking to everyone else. And no. Show them what you're doing. Get them interested. That's what I say. The only thing I would say, though, is there have been incidents in the past, and to sort of be mindful about safety issues. That was the only thing I would say about this. 99.99% of the people are absolutely fine, but there is the odd one, and you just got to be mindful. And they may take umbrage about the radio equipment. But that incidents like that are very, very few and far between. But just be mindful.
They certainly are. They certainly are. And yeah, I find whenever I go out operating in the field, if I often end up talking to all sorts of people, I tend to attract people, probably because I open up the conversation. They'll come by looking, and you have to just open the conversation up with them. Because they are interested in what you're up to. I know because I do a fair bit about with Chris, don't we? We go to Epsom Downs, which isn't a poter park, but that'd be a nice one, I would suggest. Chris?
I think going out and about, certainly you and I, Martin, have done it quite a bit. And people walk past and sort of look at you, wonder what you're doing. They're never quite confident enough to quite ask. So occasionally someone will ask what you're doing. Most people will walk past and kind of stare at you and what are these nutcases doing with fishing rods in the air and what's this bit of wire and what they do. And I hear always funny noises and they're not really sure what. They probably have an idea it's CB radio or something, or in their head, that sort of thing, But often they won't actually talk, and often they won't approach you. And I think you have to be a little bit confident to actually, engage people and to and really it's about promoting the hobby. And it's a bit similar to what we used to do in HMS Belfast. We'd sit there and operate the radio, and we could have just sat there and just used the radios, ignored the public. But actually, we saw it as our job to actually engage people, and our pro-to was not so much operating the radio, but actually engaging the public and educating them about what our hobby's about. And actually, maybe not everyone's going to go run out and go on a license course and get licensed, but people have an appreciation of what the hobby is. They may, later on they might be interested in this, or they may be more tolerant of it. And once they understand what something is, they may see somebody else somewhere and think, well, actually that's fine. It's just a guy doing a bit of amateur radio, nothing to worry about, etc. So I think this is really good at what David's doing. Paul's doing. And I remember actually there was an article in one of the magazines, I think over here many years ago, where there was an amateur that had some leaflets, and actually I think this is a really good idea as well. Printed out a couple of, a few leaflets, photocopied a few leaflets just to have with him. So if somebody did come and ask him questions, he said, look, here, there's a leaflet, explains a bit about it. Here's some websites you can have a look at if you're interested. And it gives someone something to take away. And maybe later on they might decide to have a look at, what they're being given. So no, I think this is a really good positive story, and it puts the hobby in a good light.
It certainly does. And, I know that a friend of the show, Phil Heckingbottom down there in Western Australia, he does Parks on the Air. So it's not just the States, or it's a worldwide thing, this Parks on the Air. And it's growing in popularity all the time. But I know, Martin, you also were a little bit concerned on the safety issues, weren't you? And I must admit, I prefer to operate with somebody else there. But what do you think?
Yeah, well, I live between sort of two parks. One of them, is particularly big. The cheeky side to me, Martin, says put your antenna in the park, chuck the cable over the fence, and you are technically operating a park on the air. We've done stuff before. We were on a summit, and I think someone came up to you and said, "What are you doing with that fishing rod?" And we cheekily said, "Fishing," but then proceeded to spend the next 20 minutes talking to them about what the hobby is. I remember even the guy that used to live up the road from me, Frank. He lived in a downstairs flat. Couldn't have any external antennas. He used to have a little trolley took out and sat in the car park behind his flats, and even he had a little sign there saying what it was. The idea of taking a card or a handout or something like that with you to promote what you're doing, what is amateur radio, how you can find out more, reference to a couple of club websites, I think is a brilliant idea. You can sit there and you can say, okay, you can give them the 20-second elevator pitch, but always have something more, because some people go, great, okay, thanks very much, and walk off. Other people are going to sit there and go, oh, do you know what? I'd like to find out more about that, especially if they've got a youngster with them that might genuinely want to know more. And I think that's a good thing. And I say this to everyone, and I know I say it when we talk about special event stations, please, if you're operating in a park, don't sit with your back to the public, SSB blasting out, shouting 5-9 next, because the public don't get that. Talk to them, promote the hobby. You're in a public environment, talk about what you're doing, be open with them. But as you said, Martin, I'm always worried about going out on my own. Someone might pinch my equipment. It's less of an issue perhaps if it's a handheld. People probably don't even know you're using it. More of an issue with HF, especially if you've got a big aerial that you can't take down quickly.
It certainly is, and you obviously have to be mindful, but that shouldn't stop us enjoying Parks on the Air as an amateur radio family all around the world. Parks on the Air is becoming a very great hobby. It's certainly accessible for people that are not as agile or as fit as the youngsters that go scaling mountaintops for SOTA, but it's just another operation. We shouldn't exclude people, and this is a nice thing to do. So I think it's a good story. Moving on, often I think most people think that digital voice only happens on VHF and UHF. I think that people don't really realize that it can happen on HF. And I know that certain ICOM radios have D-Star that are active on, you can make active on HF as well. So you could do D-Star. But going one step further, for those of us who don't have that sort of thing, the group, we've talked about them before, FreeDV, are having an activity day. The FreeDV boys having an activity day on this. So I kind of like this one. I'm going to pass it to Martin first because this is not something either of us have done, but I think it could be of interest. What do you think, Martin?
Yeah, well, I have tried FreeDV. There is a guy on YouTube in South Australia, Michael, VK5ZEA, I think. And he was talking about FreeDV, and I think he had an actual microphone that did it, and you could just plug it into your radio. And he released that some time ago, years ago, and that tickled my interest in digital voice on HF. And you can. I googled a bit more, and I saw that you can install this, and you can run it through your computer and your sound card just with your microphone and your computer. And I thought, oh, brilliant! I've already got the kit for this, and I tried to set it up. And at the time, and I'm talking 5-6 years ago, maybe even longer, it was a pain to get working. I understand it's a bit easier now, but at the time, I was having real issues. Eventually, I did get it working. But my problem was I didn't have anyone to talk to, so I was transmitting digital voice, and there was no one there to reply, which was a bit disappointing. And I sort of gave up with it at the time. But if it's an activity day, if it promotes digital voice, I'm all for it. Digital voice is free. It doesn't need expensive radios. It doesn't need like the AOL modems or anything like that. It works with kit that you've probably already got. So yeah, why not give it a go? And if you're struggling listening in through for the contacts in through the noise, digital voice will be amazingly clear.
Yeah, that's the beauty of a lot of what we do on VHF, the clarity. But it's a good one, and I think we were talking earlier, and Chris, you said that a number of the Flex radios actually have modules that you can download that will run FreeDV native on them. So this activity day could be a real bonus for people with Flex radios, couldn't it, Chris?
I had a quick look, and I believe, I'm not an expert on this, but I believe you can download some software to go onto your Flex to actually do it within the radio, so you don't have to use an external PC, which probably makes it a lot easier to use than interfacing with perhaps a more traditional radio into a computer. But no, this looks very interesting. I think it's a great idea to have an activity day, because that will encourage folks to actually get on that, and you may hear others on the same mode, which you may not hear at other times. So having a day to play with it, and everyone, or a number of people, might be on the air with this particular mode, I think it's a great idea. Hopefully it will promote it, and people perhaps will get a little bit more... if people get used to using it, figure out how to do it, might use it more. So I think it's a great way to promote this particular mode.
I think you're right there. I think you're right. It'd be a good one, especially if you've got a day. Then people know that there's a fairly good chance of making a fair number of contacts. Once they've made the friendship through the contacts, then hopefully it will increase a lot more. So the activity day is going to happen on the 20th of February. But I think that's pretty good. Bill, are you going to have a go at this one?
Unfortunately, that weekend I will be in Hershey, Pennsylvania with the daughters. So cheer competition weekend that weekend. So I will not be able to participate. However, when you read the article on the ICQpodcast.com, they do have a link in there about QSO Finder, which that works anytime. So if you go to the QSO Finder website for FreeDV, even if you miss the activity weekend on the 20th, you can go take a look and see who's out there trying to make FreeDV contacts. Likewise, they also added to this version ability for it to report the PSK reporter, which that's pretty cool as well. So just having a QSO with somebody will show up on PSK reporter, which is a popular site for people to find out what activity is going on with digital modes on the HF bands.
Yeah, that sounds some interesting options there, Bill. So yeah, as I say, we need to obviously look at freedv.org, which is their main website, but these other tools are available. And as Martin said early on, it was quite difficult to set up. But as things settle down and more developers get on board, things improve. And it's probably a bit like Linux. 20 years ago, you installed Linux with about 300 floppy disks. Well, that's a little bit of exaggeration, but not much. Not much, was it, Bill? But yeah, but things improve and things make easier and things move on.
Martin, can I just add a bit on this story? While everyone's been talking, I had a quick look on YouTube, and there are some videos on this very subject using FreeDV to talk on digital HF80 meters. And what was the other one I found? FreeDV Quick Start Guide. So the information is out there, it took me, less than 30 seconds to find it. I just thought I'll mention that, Martin.
Yeah, but would you be having a go, or would you think it's easy enough to do?
Not at the moment because of my shifts, and it's driving me crazy.
I know. I was lucky because I looked at your shift pattern. Thought, I've got to see tomorrow. Book him in quick. But yeah, but okay. Well, maybe you can get another go sometime, Leslie. Frank, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think the other presenters have covered it very well. A couple of things I will mention is that as I'm reading this, FreeDV, the modulation pattern and codec, claims to only occupy 1/2 of the bandwidth of a normal SSB signal. Now, taking that on faith, using an SDR with a time sync waterfall to monitor SSB transmissions, 20 meters, 75 meters, you take your pick where there's activity. It's so easy to see splatter. People are either running too much power, overdriving with modulation, the power that they do have, and so forth, to where they're taking up as much as 8 kilohertz. So to be legit, 3 kilohertz, divide that by 2, 1.5 kilohertz. Wow, sounds like something we should look at. The second thing is that for fans of flex radio, I know Bill has a 6300. I have a 6400. This is a FreeDV protocol that Flex released in January of 2016 for Smart SDR 1.6.17 and greater by Ed Gonzalez, KG5 FBT. And I think I've heard him speak about this on a podcast whose title escapes me. So it's good that, how do you get people to use new things? Well, you talk about them at club meetings so people learn more about them. They get motivated. They go do it. You talk about them on podcasts like this one and others. But you also organize events because you want to talk to people. You got to have other people. And so one of the things I really like about this story is that it's taking that last step to organize a time and some frequencies. You can go look and see where people are with the QSO finder. So let's try this. Now, I've got Bill's problem. I've got something else I'm scheduled for that day. But at the risk of being hypocritical, I do endorse this and think this is a good way to go. Organize some things around it. That's what POTA did. And boy, look at what it's done with parks. It's just exploding globally. So good deal on Fldg for offering it as a free piece of software that fortunately works with their smart SDR.
So all in all, I think it's a good thing because it's something new we can play with. Another thing that you can demonstrate at your club meetings, because there will be people interested. There will also be people who will be saying, I don't want to do that. No, it's not real radio and all those sort of things. But we have to accept that not everybody wants to do what we want to do in the hobby. So it's something new, which is good. There will be people, hopefully, with an open mind that will say, tell me about it. I don't think it's for me, but tell me about it. And you'll tell them about it, and at least they'll have an understanding. And if at a later date they want to have a go at it, at least they're not starting totally from cold. So FreeDV, have a look at it, and please, if you have the capabilities, have a go at joining in on the activity day. Moving to our next news story. Pilots fought electronic spoofing of GPS signals. Now, I've got a feeling that Bill probably knows quite a bit about this, so I'm going to pass it to you, Bill.
I will not confirm or deny spoofing GPS signals while playing Pokemon Go. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the article, is this pilots landing in Israel, and fake GPS signals are coming out of Syria from the Russian forces there, and apparently making it very hard to use GPS to land. So that's kind of scary.
Yeah, well, a lot of these things are becoming scary because as we rely more and more on technology, that technology can be fiddled with, unfortunately. In the old days when literally you were flying, all right, not commercial airlines, but you're flying in daylight and you could see the ground and one thing and another. That's a different way of flying. But now when we're moving lots of people, and it all relies on electronics, whatever we do, doesn't it? Leslie, what do you think?
Well, I've been reading this, reading the story, and just thinking, wow, initially I wanted to know what spoofing was, but you've explained it very, very well. And you are right, Martin. We rely so much on technology today. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. And these systems on aircraft are actually critical systems. The safety depends upon them. And GPS is used on a lot of things. It's used on trains. I know it is, and all sorts of things. So it makes me feel a bit uncomfortable, to be honest, and to know these systems are open as they are.
Well, the problem is anything with RF is predominantly open to interference. Anything that gets transmitted can be received, fiddled with,
Yes,
or
indeed.
interference. So not a lot we can do about that, is there? Let me pass it to Chris and see Chris, what do you think?
Well, I know a little bit about aviation. Not that I believe GPS. I don't really know how much it's used today in commercial aviation. I know there's a lot of older technology, got VOR beacons and NDB non-direction beacons that are used for navigation. I think GPS is starting to come in, but that's more for navigation. I think someone mentioned landing earlier. I don't believe we use GPS for landing. That's using a different system. That's using the ILS system, which is where you've got radio beams, you've got the localizer and the glide slope that are at the airport that are tracked by the aircraft. But that said, as Leslie was just saying, there's a huge amount of things that use GPS now. In my car, most cars now have got a built-in sat-nav, and certainly mobile phone has a GPS receiver, and everyone's walking around one in their pocket most of the time, and we are reliant on these things. I think GPS was originally developed by the US Department of Defense for use by in that market, in the sort of defense and market, and I think essentially they own that network, and I think they actually even have the right to turn it off if should they choose, which would cause a lot of issues elsewhere. And I think there are other alternative systems. I think there's one called GONLAS, I think, which is a Russian equivalent of GPS. But it's interesting that it's spoofing. So yeah, you can turn it off or you can jam it, which would you know straight away, well, my device is no longer working. It can't work out where I am. Whereas spoofing would seem to suggest that this is going to change where you think you are. So this is quite clever. I don't know quite how this would work, because your GPS receiver is using some clever maths to work out where it is in the world, based on some fixed signals coming out of a number of satellites. So I'm not quite sure how this spoofing works, but it does sound very clever, and it sounds like they're targeting, according to this news story, aircraft over in Israel. But yeah, I guess it could be yet another sort of cyber attack, couldn't it? I suppose, if you think about it in those terms. We've got people that try to do naughty things electronically with computer systems. Well, this is kind of a similar thing, isn't it? Someone's doing something naughty to have an impact on someone else's system. So yeah, it's interference. It's causing problems. I would hope, certainly in the aviation world, that if the GP, a lot of things in aviation, in fact, pretty much everything that's critical has more than one. You generally got multiple systems that are able to cope. So you get a failure of one system, something else can meet instead. So I would hope that, if the GPS can't be relied upon or is unavailable, then they would fall back to another system to allow them to continue to safely fly the plane.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Well, I do another hobby as well, not as often as I'd like. I go out geocaching, and I have a little Garmin. Other brands are available, yeah, I know, but I have a Garmin handheld GPS, and mine can either be on the GPS satellites or on the Russian satellites, or you select one or the other, or you can have both. And I thought, this is great. I'll have both because that will give me better accuracy. The problem is when you are in undergrowth looking for something and the signal's not very good, it switches from one set of satellites to another. So you find yourself sort of wandering aimlessly in about a 30-foot circle as it jumps between satellites and bits and pieces. That's how I find it. Maybe it's just me being a bit silly, but so I now switch it back to only having one set of satellites. And when I know I've lost a satellite, I'm pretty close. I know I have. But that's just a little thing. Frank, what's your thoughts on this here spoofing?
Well, it's I think the other presenters have covered a number of elements of it. If you roll back the memory tape to when President Clinton was in office in the U.S., he was the one who made the decision that would allow the relatively expensive GPS devices that sportsmen, particularly fishermen, would buy at places like Walmart and others to be more accurate. They were using double precision coordinates and for the military, and the public was having a random error added to consumer use of GPS devices. So if you were out in a big lake like I live on and you were fishing for bass and you had this place that was your honey hole for fishing and you mark it on your GPS device, when you came back to it next time, you may be in a different place because that had a random error to it. I used to teach this back in the 90s when I was teaching GIS, which included GPS. And we'd walk the campus at Mississippi State and use a cheap Garmin from Walmart, and I would use this as a teachable moment. Well, President Clinton turned that error off, and suddenly that inexpensive GPS was as accurate as the double differential from Trimble that cost, I don't know, $3,000 or something. So that's a little bit of the history behind this. And you roll that forward to today. Chris touched on the fact that you typically need three satellite references to coordinate your location. And you need more than that if you want to go vertically, the Z dimension in that. So you got a lot going on. Chris is, I think, absolutely correct, as are the other presenters, that there's a lot of things going on there. So you've got to be a bit ingenious to spoof it. But imagine being able to direct a spoofing signal toward an aircraft carrier where planes are landing, just a little bit off, and you're crashing, and rendering a aircraft carrier as a big risk, for example. So I could go on with those examples. Critical to military, critical for guidance of missiles. We've seen movies where the bad guy takes them over and redirects a nuke being fired from the good guy's silos back on the good guy. And it's basically by spoofing, because it's changing the coordinates to some other reference point, even though you don't know what their intended coordinates are. If you manipulate the reference point, you can then redirect that back. Okay, class is over. Sorry. But it's an interesting story, and it can go pretty deep. But this is something, along with our 5G story that we've been covering. Pilots just can't catch a break, Martin.
Yeah, pilots, yeah. If you screw with the GPS, you're screwing with the altimeters. They've really got a bit of a problem, haven't they? But there you go. Martin, last words on this one?
Yeah, I mean, the amount we rely on tech is absolutely scary. I mean, it scared the bejeebers out of me when my phone sent me a map of everywhere I've been in the past few months, like literally walking around inside buildings and stuff. I'm like, I did not give authorization for my phone to do that. And it's doing it. And I recently found out why I'm seeing targeted advertising, because of an app that I installed that I bet most people have got installed on their phones. Yeah, so there's a lot that relies on GPS. I mean, the cheeky side, I mean, Leslie said a minute ago that, trains have GPS on them. And on the cheeky side, I mean, like, how do you get lost in a train? It's on route. But then I realised, of course, it's for tracking where trains are and stuff like that. My local buses have them on there. The controllers are constantly bringing up the timetables because of that. It does scare me that they can do this. It scares me that we put so much trust into sat navs and things like that. Yes, it's very, very convenient. You can put in where you want to go and you can go, but there's a lot to be said for a map and for things like that. The good old analog devices, and these are the analog tools that we've all got used to. But kids nowadays are learning how to do things with phones. Great. You still need to learn to use a map, just in case your phone doesn't work. And this is an example of that. If countries are, so there's GPS signals for whatever reason, and I'm not speculating why they might be doing it. You need to have an out plan. I know I had a moan about Ofcom allowing, certain tests and jamming to go to take place in this country. It does scare me how many other countries are doing equally crazy things, maybe.
Yeah, it is a worry. It's down to technology. We use so much of it. We're really worried. It can be worrying times. Right, I'm going to make the next one our last news story. And unfortunately, normally I like to end on a high, but we have an announcement here of Bob Bruninga, W4APR, the gentleman who is the father of APRS. And I think we should celebrate what he's given us. I've played with APRS on and off for the last 20 years. It's much, much easier now than when you've got all the maps in one place on the internet. But I remember downloading individual maps of areas and then plotting things in that in the earlier days with a TNC and all those sort of things. But Bob Bruninga, Frank, you spotted this one. Would you like to go first?
Sure. Very sad news. Just broke today. Bob Bruninga, WB4APR in Maryland, died on February the 7th. He had about a 2-year battle with cancer. He was 73. I've had some moderate email interactions with Mr. Bruninga. He was an intellectual engineer, and I say that very specifically. because he wasn't just an engineer. He lived it. He was an early driver of an electric car. He had gotten into energy choices and alternative power sources. Wrote a book in 2018 called Energy Choices for Radio Amateur that ARRL published. And I could go on and on and on. He's known to amateur radio for the automatic packet reporting system, which is used as a misnomer of automatic position reporting system. That used to irritate him. Some of the emails that he and I exchanged when I first made that mistake, he sort of let me know that's not what it was in a very kind and gentle way. He used the APRS system early on in the military, but he did work as an engineer at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. But he was sort of famous in amateur radio for using it for the Army-Navy football game. And I know you blokes over across the pond don't consider it real football. I assure you that they do in the military academies. They consider American football real football. And one team runs a football from one academy, Army, or Navy to the other, depending on which home field that it's being played on. And Bob early on used APRS to track where the football was. So he will be missed. I had my last email with him was about 2 years ago, and he said that he wasn't sure he was going to make it. He didn't really want to get into it. Being a cancer survivor myself, I understood that. He has made a what will be an indelible imprint. His Appalachian Trail Golden Packet, which he wanted to use, again, very much like running the football from Army to Navy or Navy to Army, to get a packet, what he called the Golden Packet, from Stone Mountain in Georgia to Mount Katahdin in Maine each July. Are there enough digipeaters and iGates to move that packet? I'll end there. Obviously, big loss, but wow, what did he give us in amateur radio?
Yeah, and that was APRS was one of the things that I was very excited about when I first came into amateur radio. Unfortunately, in the UK, there doesn't seem to be as many digi repeaters around. And I'm guilty of that because I used to run one at one point in time. Yeah, it was still a great idea. And whenever you talk to anybody in the commercial world and they start talking about tracking, we can track people on a site, and we can track this, and you only have to say the words, you mean it's like what we use in amateur radio, that APRS stuff? And they go, oh, you know about that. Oh, damn. You know, they're trying to sell it as the best thing. So, yeah, it's, I think it was a very interesting product. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
I was just listening to everything that Frank was saying, and he put it across beautifully. I couldn't have put it across better myself. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, well, as I said, this one is really just a recognition of a nice man. Bill, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I also agree with what Frank said. Bob was a senior research engineer at the United States Naval Academy for a lot of years, and he came up with a lot of other technologies that we may never actually find out because they're probably classified. But just the idea that he invented this, use for packet radio, this extra use for packet radio. I mean, we had the weather station hooked up back in the late 90s on APRS just to, show up so you can see what the temperature is and the wind direction. I mean, it's so much more than just location services. It's basically a data service that, just did a really good application on top of packet radio. And it is really sad that he passed away. And like Frank said so eloquently, he tattooed the hobby in a way that very few people ever get to. Case in point is, how many HTs have APRS built into them now? How many other systems are tied into APRS now, as for mobile radios and that kind of stuff. I mean, at one point it was a major ordeal to get a TNC and a GPS receiver hooked up to a radio on the, whatever your APRS frequency is for the region you're in. And now there's radios I'm seeing online that you just hook a GPS antenna up and it's all ready to go. You just have to turn it on. So it's a huge loss for the community, but at the same time, boy, did he leave a mark. Wow.
Yeah, I agree totally with you, Bill. And I know Chris, Martin, and myself all have Anytone 878s, which has GPS built into it, and you can do APRS with it. So, what do you think, though, Martin?
Well, I mean, it's a great feat. I mean, based on that alone, having your idea put into so many radios of different brands. I mean, it's kudos to this guy, for developing such a great product. I know that there are people out there, and I've seen, again, more YouTube videos of people using it to report data from repeater sites, weather temperature, doors opening, that's something like that, battery voltage, the kind of stuff that we use SMS and text messages for. They do this over APRS. I'll be honest, before that day, I was guilty. I thought it was positioning because that's what I knew APRS for, plotting the positions of people on the map of where they're going and things like that. And then I thought, oh, you can do more with this. Not that I've ever tried to do more with this, but it is something that one day I will probably have a bit more of a play. I've not done too much with Packet or anything like that, but I'll be interested to learn more. Maybe I don't need it, but just for fun, why not?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, my first APRS system, which I run mobile for a while, was a Yaesu FT290, a Garmin GPS, and a Tiny Track 2, which was a one-way TNC. So it would transmit, but it didn't receive. And you could plot on a map where you've been afterwards. So that was my first experience of it, but all fun. Chris, last words on this one?
Yeah, so, a real legacy from Bob. Obviously, we pass on our condolences, but, what a legacy to leave behind. People are going to continue to use this system for many years. And as you were saying, it's become easier. I mean, I've got an app on my phone that has APRS. It's obviously not going over RF, but essentially it's able to send and receive APRS packets. And as you were saying, it's not just positioning. So I've received before. In fact, I remember once I was in the States, happened to have it on, and someone sent me a message. What's this? And realised, as Martin was saying, that you can also do messaging and all kinds of other data transmission over this network. So it's clever technology, and I'm sure it will live on. And it's a real legacy for Bob to have left behind.
It certainly is. So, Bob, our thoughts go with you. The amateur radio community thanks you for your offering to us of APRS, and we really appreciate what you did for us. Probably should have said that before you passed, but to the family, our condolences go with them.
Martin, there'll be a celebration this summer. I'm told that's the only thing that we know right now. So hams can be on the lookout for that and engage appropriately.
Okay, Frank. That's good news, because it just means he won't just go away. Right, let's find out what the boys have been up to since the last time I spoke to them. I'm going to go to Bill first, just in case he's on a hard stop, but we're running really late anyway. So, Bill, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
I deeply appreciate that, because I am on a hard stop. So good timing, good suggestion. Radio-wise, I've been chasing soda activators like crazy the last couple weeks. Small group in the Northeast here on Facebook got it in their heads that they were gonna, gobble up some of these winter bonus points, and we've been, believe it or not, the vast majority of them have been on 60 meters. Regionally, because the bands are hot, 60 meters has been really good. Right off the bat in the morning, I don't seem to get much love with it, but a few hours after sunrise, I seem to get pretty much the northeast of North America here on 60 meters very easily with QRP signals. So I've been picking up a lot of stations when I can. It is getting a little bit later for sunset up here, and so therefore we're starting to get some people after work as well, which is nice. So I end up chasing the one I keep thinking of is AC3B because he has a nice call, kind of like mine. Jim's been every other week. It seemed like he's been doing a day or two. He'll do like 4 or 5 activations, and usually I'm at work. But so if I can get him over lunch or after work, his last one I usually get him. So that's been the main thrust of the radio right now. CQ Worldwide Iridi's coming up, but I believe it's going to be a weekend. I have other commitments going on, so it'll just be a part-time effort on probably in the evenings or on Sunday morning early. Likewise, I ordered a second digirig. I talked about this before. It's a very, very tiny USB-based sound card and radio control and PTT control for my I'm using it on the KX3, but it works on a whole grocery list of radios like the Zygoos and that. Oh, just a whole grocery list of radios people have gotten this to work for. I'm blanking on the other ones right now. Sorry, but I bought a second one for the soda bag because there's a phrase around here that's 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So I bought a second one so I can just leave one in the soda bag now. So I have one set up on the Raspberry Pi 400 all the time, and now I have one in the soda bag, and that's all configured with the soda laptop. So we are good to go for digital modes when I'm portable. And that's about it for right now. So I'll pass it back to everyone in 7.3s and have a great time, guys.
Yeah, well, that's good timing, Bill, if we got you all in before you had to leave. But yeah, sounds very, very interesting what you've been up to. Frank, what have you been up to?
Well, as I mentioned, I think the last time I was on, I had the article on attic antennas on the Cushcraft D4 40 through 10 dipole that I put up in my fallback radiator barrier attic or loft. It's in this month's The Spectrum Monitor, and I'd use Whisper to test some initial ability to get outside that radiator barrier. And I had some communication with W2AEW Alan Wolke, who works for Tektronix and who is just a really, really knowledgeable and good guy on RF measurement of any kind. He was shocked at the results that I got. He was candid about that. But he said that, honestly, it looks like his opinion would be that the fallback covering is an attenuator rather than a barrier, so it may soak up some signal. So I've got more research on this. I'll have a few more papers that I've taken some measurements and things, and I hope it'll help hams who are in HOAs or that they have to use their attics as their antenna garden. I don't guess it really qualifies as a farm given that. So that's out in the Spectrum Monitor this month. I've been studying some additional trigonometry that I either never knew or forgot, trying to help with some work I'm doing on the Whisper database for the HamPi Citizen Science Group. I'm trying to take how we use Whisper to detect band openings and make it a little more accurate, maybe give us a little better reading in what direction and what band and when. Whisper is a weak signal mode that Joe Taylor, his team has developed. And we look at it a lot, but when we see that, it doesn't really tell us a lot about CW or sideband openings per se. Certainly doesn't guarantee it. So I'm going to be giving a talk on Jim Heath, W6LG's popular YouTube channel, on using Whisper in amateur radio soon. But I can promise you there won't be any trigonometry in that talk. I'm also completing a paper with Dr. Scott McIntosh. We interviewed him. He was my guest in a feature about a year ago, Martin, I believe, here on the podcast. He's the deputy director for the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Colorado. And his team has a new theory about how sunspots are part of the magnetic cycle, commonly named after the astrophysicist Hale, the Hale cycle, and their prediction for Cycle 25 sunspots. We're comparing his team's work to the official predictions of the panel for NASA and NOAA that they come out with. That's sort of the holy grail. We're trying to make that understandable to amateur radio operators, so it's kind of the elevator version of astrophysics. Looks like Redcom is interested, so that may appear in that magazine in the UK at some point. Of course, I'm delighted at the prospect there. But Scott is originally from Scotland, so he would be particularly delighted for some of his work to be in an amateur radio magazine published in the United Kingdom. Finally, around my household, my wife and I wait till after the Christmas period to do our Christmas gifts. And so I got a Yaesu FTDX10 in January, and it will replace an IC 7300 in my shack. No, I'm not getting rid of the 7300. It will replace a Yaesu FT450D in one of my portable stations. So the 7300 will be a portable ops type of rig there. I think once you go to a pan adapter and you're doing it in contesting or anytime you're searching and pouncing or looking for things, it's really hard to go back. So I'll put the FT450, which is a really good rig, I'll put it up for sale soon. The FTD X10 is third on Rob Sherwood's tables on rig performance, and the YouTube videos on this rig told me that Yaesu is still in the game. So, Martin, more evidence I've not been a bad boy.
You certainly haven't been, have you? Yeah, I quite like that rig as well. Yeah, I have actually done some HF, but I'll talk a bit more about that later. Leslie, what have you been up to?
Well, what happened was a member of my local Silverthorne Radio Club, Valmir, he's going to get a mention this on this podcast because he set me a right puzzle and a half, come up with a handheld, and I was trying to work out how to program this thing because the instructions are all in Chinese, and it's like, what am I doing wrong? And I was up the club on Friday, and I thought, okay, I can't connect this up. You know, what else am I going to do? And I'd been pottering about on this particular problem for a while, and I changed the lead. All of a sudden, I got a download from the radio, and I thought, that's a great sign. And then I had sort of a predetermined bit of software and with the frequencies on it, and I downloaded that up to the radio, and I was so chuffed we got that working. Took me a while, but we got there in the end. So, Valmir, I hope you're enjoying the radio. It was good fun, and I learned a bit in the process. So over to you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it was a USB programming cable. I've been caught out more than once in this household where Mrs. B's bought USB cables for charging, and they don't always have the data wires. Sometimes they only have the two wires, the positive and negative for charging. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they look identical, mate. You can get caught out on that one, but at least you sussed it, mate. At least you sussed it. Martin, what have you been up to?
Oh, probably not as much as everyone else. I bought a new radio. Now, I'm not going to say what it was, but I got it on eBay. It was an amazing price. It was ex-demo, and I thought, yes, very excited by this. And the guy sent it to me, and I'm going to name and shame, DHL, lost it. Drop it, hide it, lose it. It turns out there was a mountain high enough to stop them, and it's in southwest London. So very peeved about that. I can't have a go at them completely, though, because they're lost and found team. When you can eventually find a number to call them on, were very helpful. They were constantly chasing the driver. Where did you deliver it to? He's apparently delivered it to a click and collect location and took the trouble to put my name down as a signatory, which is interesting considering it should have been the name of the guy that owns the store. But that aside, lost that radio, so have to go back to the drawing board and have another look for that. Otherwise, been playing with our digital talk group a bit radio-wise, that's probably it. I still need to move my shack. It's dismantled at the moment. Everything with the exception of the hotspot, which allows me to get onto the digital talk group. But I still need to move that, get the cables moved downstairs and run through. And also an apology. I had an email from Carl from Yaesu, although I don't think this was specifically relating to Yaesu, regarding some stuff they've been working on the South Hampshire repeater group. A number of linked, I guess they're fusion repeaters in South Hampshire. A very interesting looking project. And I did promise that I'd mention their website, GB3SH, Golf Bravo 3 Sierra Hotel. .co.uk if people want to find out more about that. And Carl, apologies, I have been very busy and unwell, as you can hear, but I will try and catch up in the next few weeks for a more in-depth chat. Maybe we can record that and get to know more about that project, because it sounds really interesting. But I've been having a read of that, and fascinating stuff.
That certainly sounds interesting. And Shane, you ain't told me what the radio is. I might have to come around and twist your arm to find out what it is. Anyway, was it one I want by any chance?
No.
All right then.
I'll give you a clue. It generates RF and it's got an aerial.
Oh, all right.
That narrow it down, doesn't it?
Oh,
you did so easy, Rothwell.
Yeah. All right, I ain't talking to you no more. Chris, what have you been up to?
Well, radio-wise, not a lot. I've been pretty busy with Radio Club business, sorting out a few admin things at the club. So that's been taking up quite a bit of my time. I've been quite a bit, actually, with the Raspberry Pi. I've seemed to have accumulated. It's amazing, actually. I've got about 10 of them now. I have no idea how I managed to accumulate so many different versions over the years, including and I think actually this was mentioned earlier by Bill. I think it's dropped off now. A Raspberry Pi 400, which is the one that's built into the keyboard. And actually, that's a really nice little solution for operating. I actually have it working in my locker, and I've got a spare screen next to my desk, so I actually have it plugged in there, and I can use that for me playing with things, and it's actually really, really good. I've actually now resurrected my Raspberry Pi 4 at home, which has got 8 gigabytes of memory, and I'm actually using that as a desktop. And it's actually, do you know what? It's pretty good. You can do most things you can do on a computer, most on your PC, on a Raspberry Pi, and it's remarkably good. So I've been using it more for learning some kind of IT type things, some web technology type stuff. So some PHP and some web type stuff. So for me, it's more of an educational thing, but I'm really impressed with it, but not really radio. Although there is a radio purpose around the website that we've been developing to do with an upcoming thing for the club. But no, radio-wise, I did switch on HF at the weekend, and unfortunately, it was just wall-to-wall contests, so I switched it off again, to be honest, because there was no point trying to make contact because everyone was just calling CQ contests. So bit of a shame, but I think I made one contact at the weekend, but that was about it. So not a huge amount, but no. Apart from that, not much else, Martin.
Well, you've been busy. You've been busy and enjoying. I did try and buy one of those Raspberry Pi 400s about a week ago. Trouble is, Raspberry Pis at the moment, it's probably because everybody said, there's a chip shortage. But they're like rocking horse manure at the moment. They really are. I could get a Raspberry Pi 400 if I took it with a French or German keyboard.
I believe the Pi Zero, which is in a lot of hotspots for things like, I've got a few hotspots at home, and they've all got inside them a Pi Zero. Of course, I think you were saying to me previously, Martin, that they're pretty much out of stock everywhere, which will mean that people trying to get hotspots might struggle for a while until they're available again, which is a bit of a shame.
There is a limit on buying them.
Yeah.
Is there? I think you were saying, Martin, though, that you'd managed to get one of the. There's a new version, I think, isn't there? There's a version 2, I think, for the Pi Zero, isn't there?
There is. I bought another hotspot, but I bought a hotspot minus the Raspberry Pi, which sounded a silly way, but when I was scrolling through the auction site, I thought, that's good, because I only wanted the board, really, but it came with the case and all the bits and pieces to do it. And I thought, well, a Zero, they're under 10 quid, not a problem, blah, blah, blah. And then I went to buy a Raspberry Pi Zero, and second hand, they were going for £25 to £30 on the auction site, because nobody's got them. And they brought out a new version, I think it's the 2W, and they're also like rocking horse manure. And I paid a bit of a premium, probably too much for it, but I bought one off the auction site, and it's a lot more powerful than the original Zero. And it works very, very well. But for anybody who's got, say, one of these hotspots in the black metal case, if your Raspberry Pi totally dies anytime, the new Zero 2W works perfectly okay. It fits exactly the same. It drops into the same hole. The header connect the other board, the MMDVM board connects exactly as it should, and it all fits and it all works. So I was quite pleased with that. So I did get one working, Chris. Yeah, well, as I say, I was out about almost a couple of weeks ago. Tried to work our colleague Phil, VK6 ADF, as I was driving the 50 miles from my house to the south coast. And it hadn't really occurred to me. My brain was probably in neutral, but you can have a phone signal, but it don't mean to say you got a data signal. And I've got an MMDVM hotspot in the car and an internet dongle. But although I had phone signal, I had no data signal. So there were large parts where I suddenly disappeared on Phil for a few minutes and then came back, which was a bit strange. Non-radio related, Colin was over from Ireland last week, and we got up to lots of things, but very little radio, unfortunately. So you didn't catch him on the air particularly well. On the radio front, let's start with this one. Edmund mentioned to me about GB 100 BBC, and I managed to work the special event station of 100 years of the BBC. Spoke to our friend and colleague Jim, and Jim was very chatty when he knew who we were, so that was a good one. Quite enjoyed that one. I did publish the stats for the talk group. Every first of the month I download the stats and try and give us a feeling for how many connections that there are. But it has to ripple through all the systems. So it's not 100%, but it's a nice way of working out how we're doing. We went up by one country last month, which now means we've got 40 countries. There are 18 new call signs appeared on the group, and we did 3,265 connections last month. So not bad, and quite pleased with that. Now, Martin's upset about his radio because he bought a radio. But, Martin, I bought a radio and I got mine. Sorry. But mine's probably not as exciting as yours. I was out with Colin and we went to we happened to be walking down the road and there was a house clearance shop. And cutting the story quick, popped in, just having those around, something to do, really bored, and spotted a small transistor radio and it said not working on it. And it was a Roberts Rambler 2 circa 1984. It only does medium wave and long wave, which are both AM, obviously. And the guy said, it don't work. And I said, how much do you want for it? And he said, £3. And I thought, I'm not even going to try and knock you down for £3. So I parted with £3, had a quick look at it, parted with £3, came home, resoldered one lead onto the battery connector and one lead which would come off the speaker. And yeah, all right, it wants some cleaning up and tidying up and tarting up, but electronically it's working now. Now I know I could renovate it by putting capacitors and one thing and another in it, but it does actually work. And it only cost me £3, Martin. So whether I keep it or not is another matter. So that's what I've been up to. I quite enjoyed fixing that little radio as well. Brought it back to life, saved it from the scrap heap. So that's what I've been up to. Right, well, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. I'd like to thank Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
Been fun. See you next time.
Yeah, we'll do. Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
Yeah, good as always, mate. And Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH.
Thanks, Martin, and great time as always.
Yeah, I've enjoyed tonight, mate. And Bill had to leave us a little bit early, but at least he managed to tell us what he'd been up to, which was good. Right, all's left for me to do now is say 73s to you all, and we'll continue with the rest of the podcast. 73s.
Cheerio.
73.
For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin, M6BOY. We start off with news here that the RSGB has published a notice of variation that will enable radio amateurs licensed by Ofcom to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee of Her Majesty the Queen by using the special RSL of Q. This notice of variation will be used through till June 2022, and we'll pop a link on the ICQ podcast website of where you can apply for your variation notice. Many of you will know that at the moment the Beijing Winter Olympics is taking place, and there are special event radio call signs Bravo Yankee 1 Charlie Romeo Alpha / Whiskey Oscar 22 available to contact. It's active on FT8 single sideband and CW, working across 160 to 10 metres, and will continue to operate until the end of the games on the 20th of February. There are contacts awards available, and so we'll pop a link to the Chinese Radio Amateur Club, who are organising this special event station, for you to find out more information. The ARRL have announced a new worldwide digital contest. It's going to be taking place on the 4th and 5th of June, and it's going to be sort of covering a lot of the spectrum between 6 and 160 metres in single and multi operator modes. There's going to be lots of different categories for power as well. So QRP level around about 5 watts. And also then obviously there's going to be 100 watts mode as well. So basically the ARRL have issued distance calculation tools and the ways to submit logs, etc. Which will help people get ready for this event. So as always, a link to the ARRL digital contest page will be on our website. This Valentine's Day, the 14th of February, marks the 100 years of the Marconi Company beginning to broadcast a 5-minute program of speech and music within the half-hour calibration transmission. So to mark this event, a special call sign to Mike Tango will be available, transmitting from an ex-army hut in the village of Writtle near Chelmsford in Essex, UK. Initially, the station had only 200 watts and transmitted on 70 metres for 28 kilohertz using an inverted L antenna. Members of the Chelmsford Amateur Radio Society will be using, this call sign. The one to look out for GB100-2 Mike Tango is what you're looking for, and it's going to be active, on the 14th of February. Usually operating on the HF bands, but will potentially be picked up locally on VHF and UHF as well. QSLs will be confirmed on Logbook of the World and EQSLs. Unfortunately, there are no QSL cards or bureau for this event station. If you want to find out more information, visit the group's webpage at golf0mikewhiskeytango.org.uk. Time for our features episode, where we review HamPi. Hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this episode's feature, I'd like to talk to you about a software suite that, unfortunately, the gentleman that told me about it, I've not been able to link up with. So I'm going to have to do this on my own. Hi. Now, the piece of software in question is a piece of software called HamPi. And HamPi is effectively a suite of software for amateur radio that can be downloaded from the internet as a Raspberry Pi image. Now, once the Raspberry Pi image is installed on your Raspberry Pi, you're up and running with lots and lots of amateur radio software. Kind of nothing new about this because people have done it before on Linux, but this is the first time I've seen it done on the Pi. Okay, so my initial concerns were when Dave Slotter, W3DJS, originally wrote to me about this, I thought, is it going to be maintained? Because quite honestly, if it's not going to be maintained, it'll go out of date fairly quickly. Fortunately, I was checking just before I started this recording and found that Dave had produced another new version of this within the last 8 days. So it's something that he's working on. It's kind of a work in progress, which this type of thing always will be. But say worth a look. Now, unfortunately, as I say, I was unable to arrange an interview with Dave Slotter, W3DJS, because we just couldn't seem to meet up on an internet link. Now, that could very well be because of the time differences between the UK, and equally, Dave wasn't very well at one point. For anybody else who wants to do it, if this sort of thing with us, if the time difference is a problem, I'm sure one of our American presenters would have been more than happy to do this. And we did offer that to Dave as well. Right, so what are you going to do with HamPi? Well, I'm going to be open and honest and upfront here. We always do open and honest interviews or reviews. I found this not the easiest piece of software to get working. This could very well be the hardware I was running, how I went about it, but it didn't just fall out of the box into the Pi and work. So just be aware, if you're not particularly internet savvy and you're not particularly good at computers, you may struggle with this one. Now, if you do, I did spot one website saying that you can buy a pre-configured SD card for a Raspberry Pi with this software on it. So it's not excluding everybody. There are pre-configured SD cards around. Now, so you start looking for HamPi. Now, I did a Google search. HamPi, the GitHub site, appeared on the second page. There are umpteen things about HamPis and holidays and all these sort of things which are nothing to do with amateur radio. So a better search, if you want to find this, is to look for HamPi software. Now, this then came up fairly quickly in Google, and I found a site called Software Forge where David installs the images for you to download. So once you've done that, you then download the image. Click on the image, it'll download automatically to your computer. Now, the image is a compressed image, and that's where I fell the first time I did this, because this is a massive file that's coming down. When it's uncompressed, it's almost 15.5 gigs. So you will need a 32 gig memory card, or SD card, for your Raspberry Pi as a minimum. But once it's uncompressed, you've got the full image. Now, for those of you who like being able to talk to others about an ongoing project, there is a Google group for HamPi, which works very, very well, I'm sure. My installation, I had a nightmare of an installation because I use Linux as my main machine. So I downloaded the image. The image said, this is a backup. This is a compressed backup. Would you like me to restore the backup to your SD card? And I went, yes, please. Thinking it'd be great. No, it wasn't. It didn't work. So, yeah, you will have to do this properly. Now, David has various ways of doing it. There are various, and he mentions one particular, which I didn't use. The Raspberry Pi image writer recognizes this piece of software, the compressed file. So you can, if you load the Raspberry Pi image writer, and then say, open a custom image, you'll then be able to write that to your SD card. Now, at this point in time, if you've got this far and you've downloaded it, and you're about to write your SD card, there's a couple of gotchas that I've been got. Make sure your SD card is clean. There are no other petitions, anything else. They may say it'll format and redo the whole of the SD card. Don't believe what happens. I got caught out a couple of times on this. Make sure your SD card is totally clean. Go to your, and you should be good then to go. Now, be honest with you, this, because it's a mega file, takes a phenomenal amount of time to write the SD card and then verify it. And in fairness, you do need to verify it. Why wouldn't you? But I would suggest you could go off and have your tea or whatever. On my machine, it took nearly 45 minutes to build the SD card. Once built, you then stick it into a Raspberry Pi. Now, David says that this software's been customized a little bit to run as best as it can on a Raspberry Pi 4. And a Raspberry Pi 4 is quite a powerful little computer in its own right. I have one of mine out on loan at the moment, so I was stuck. I didn't have a Raspberry Pi 4. But he did say it worked on a Raspberry Pi 3, so I've had this running on a Raspberry Pi 3, and just out of interest, a couple of days, I bought a Raspberry Pi Zero 2W, which is the new little Zero model, which is faster and all that sort of thing. And just for giggles, I plugged the SD card into this, and it came up, and it was working. So I wouldn't say everything works because I didn't test everything, but, you know, the image is fairly stable. It works on most Raspberry Pis. It might be a hell of a lot slower, but you have to eventually get things going. Now, one of the things I did say is, you know, make sure the SD card is totally clear. When you build a SD card, or when an SD card is built for a Raspberry Pi, it usually creates two areas on the SD card. One called boot, which contains a number of files, which is written in FAT32 format, so you can read that under Windows quite happily and edit them should you wish, although maybe you wouldn't want to. The other one is where the Pi software is installed. Now, I have had odd times when I've booted up and I've made multiple images, and one of the times I had a problem and it just wouldn't talk to my HDMI television that we were using to use it. So on the boot menu, in the boot sector, you can find a file called config.txt and change it's about second or third line down. It's got a hash in front of it, and it says HDMI _safe equals 1. If you remove the hash, that will force it into HDMI safe mode and brings it up in quite a low resolution. But if you've got a monitor or a telly that doesn't want to do the mode that the Pi is trying to do at that point in time, that may help you. Anyway, once you've got it installed and it comes up, the number of screens come up to tell you what to do. Now, in fairness, David's automatically configured the screen reader to come on. So if we've got somebody who's visually impaired, it will tell you at length exactly what you need to do, where you need to, and what you need to click on. I found this a bit tedious, and in the end muted the television so I could carry on setting up. It does ask you to configure the network, even if you decide to run with a cable into the device. It will still ask you if you want to configure wireless networking. So you go through, follow it all the way through. I would suggest at the initial setup, you don't change the passwords. The default password is Raspberry, and the default user is Pi. Change them once it's up and working. Don't change them early on, because if you make a mistake or you get yourself into a tiz, then you're going to be in big trouble. So, what's on this image? Well, it's a standard Raspberry Pi image with quite a few interesting applications. There's general ham radio applications, often one of the menus, and there's things there like HamLib, Chirp, FreeDV, and BlueDV, and things like that. And I'm not going to read them all out, but general packages that are good for amateur radio. Then you've got antenna ham radio applications, and there's the various modeling programs there that you can just click on and run to your heart's content. Once again, worthwhile having a look at some of these. Another menu option is a digital ham radio applications, and there you've got things like WJTX, JS8 call, all those sort of type applications, PSK31, etc. A lot more in there. Then we go for software-defined radio. There's a whole menu system on software-defined radio, and it's got various drivers and connectors for running various dongles all the way through. So I think you'll find something in there if you're a software-defined radio person. Now, APRS. Now, I didn't know all of these ones actually existed, and I've played with APRS for quite some time. But there's 6 applications for APRS there. So if you're into APRS, have a look at that. We also find on another menu the Fldg application suite, which is pretty much all of the Fldg programs. You know, you've got Fldg, Fldg, and other such programs that have been written. So that's quite a good one. There's a whole section in the menu on logging programs, and looking at this quickly, it looks like about 10 different logging programs that you could try out. And then you've got some WinLink applications. There's half a dozen of those, followed by Morse code applications. So looking at this, probably about 15. I'm only giving you a rough clue because I'm not counting them as I'm looking at them. But I believe there to be in excess of 100 programs on this particular image that I'm looking at. And don't forget, if you find something else, or you want to put on an office package, supposing you're using this in the shack with, say, a Raspberry Pi or one of the Raspberry Pi 400s, which is a keyboard, you could also put on the virtual office program, LibreOffice, and other such useful apps, and you could have a very, very useful shack computer here. So, in conclusion, I would say, interesting piece of software. If you're computer literate, it's well worth having a go at this one. When you get it working, and it should work straight away, let's be honest, but when I got it working, I was more than impressed. The time it takes to get it up and running is well worth the effort. However, if you're not computer literate, there's a couple of things you can do. Obviously, you could buy the pre-configured SD card, and I'm not advertising, I'm just letting you know there's one out there. Or get somebody who you know to build you one of these, or show you how to build an image card for a Raspberry Pi, and take you through what is on it as well. possibly something that would be very useful for people at the club to have a look at things. And in fairness, yeah, if you put the effort in, I think you'll be really pleased. Dave is a very clever person. I'm not knocking Dave for this. I had problems. They could very well have been the hardware I was working on at the time. So please don't discount this, but it is well worth a look. And especially as I see that Dave seems to be keeping this up to date, well, that's a big tick in my box. So I hope this was of interest.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed Martin's review on HamPi, and hopefully his experiences, as I help you if you give that one an experimental go, and as I say, just see if that's something of interest to yourself. So certainly, kudos to the developer, as I say, for working on the project, and as I say, hopefully Martin's experiences will help you as I get it set up if you wish to give it a go. Right, feedback on our last episode 369, and we got some feedback from Nesta, and regarding one of our discussions we were having on the show, and he's talking in relation to 5G, and he says in Europe it's licensed to operate up to 3.8 gigahertz band, while in the USA it's licensed to operate up to 4.2 gigahertz. Aeronautical altimeters start to operate from 4.2 gigahertz and above. Therefore, 400 megahertz of bandwidth separation that Europe has implemented provides enough protection between 5G and aeronautical altimeters operating frequency, hence why this is not a problem in Europe and it's a bigger problem in the USA. Moreover, it's been discussed that mobile phones may connect and hand off between numerous base stations while a plane is flying over Europe. This is not possible because of the design of the mobile phone networks. In particular, all mobile phone mast antennas are installed with at least a 2-degree decline towards Earth in an effort to improve communication with mobile phones at ground level. This actually causes problems for mobile phone users in high-rise buildings. Hence, many high-rise buildings implement an internal microcellular environment, allowing mobile phone companies to offer services for those customers living in such buildings. Taking this into consideration, it's very difficult for all mobile phones to connect to any cellular station while flying high at cruising altitude. Having said that, it's also perfectly possible for a mobile phone to connect to mobile phone base stations during takeoff and landing, the most critical stage of a flight, and the reason why airlines require passengers to switch off their mobile phones. So Lester says there's a couple of cents on the discussion. Thanks a lot for your efforts and entertaining podcasts. To add to that, Lester, something I've heard as well, which probably also matches what you were saying, is that I say Boeing in particular are having a lot of problems in the States in relation to changing their altimeters, and this is to do with the fact of the construction of the bow of the aircraft being steel, whereas Airbus is fiberglass, and that's making it harder for them to change the altimeters as they are in that system. So again, a lot of stories we're hearing from America and the 5G system, but I say Nesta sounds like he knows what he's talking about, Dad, and that's what we've always said. It's a podcast for amateurs by amateurs, and great to get his feedback.
Certainly is, Colin, and that's the good thing. None of us know it all, and this has been raised as a concern. I'm glad that Lester's had his 2 pence, as he puts it, because in fairness, it's educational to all of us, and a 2-degree declination. A 2-degree angle of the aerial pointing towards Earth would certainly not allow it to radiate skyways, and I should have thought of this truthfully, but I didn't. So, it's education on all our parts. We're now starting to get a fuller picture of what the problem was, Colin, or is, and I think that's the good thing that's come out of all this. So back to you.
No, very true. Agree with you entirely. So, yeah, certainly very interesting. I know I was talking to some of our IT engineers about this problem, and as I say, they just thought it was a very, very simple issue. And certainly, the information was gained from the ICQ podcast, and from listeners like Nesta, etc., allowed me to give them a better picture. So, yeah, it just proves our community is phenomenally intelligent on these things. Well, Dan, I know you've been telling me over the last few days about how the talk group has been ticking along nicely and is, as I say, attracting a nice steady stream of people listening and talking and meeting up on the group. And as I say, certainly it's great for people to continue to get involved. So, as I say, normally things you can go to digitalgroup.icqpodcast.com to find out more about how to connect to the group. But certainly you've been enjoying your time on the talk group over the last few days.
Yeah, certainly have been, Colin. And the talk group over the last couple of days has been particularly busy and most enjoyable. Not just people talking to me, but I've heard people talking to each other all around the world and thoroughly getting used, which is exactly what we wanted. It wasn't just to come and talk to an ICQ presenter. It was there for our listeners to enjoy themselves. And I think it's working very well. I still keep on about if you blip it, I might not pick you up. And I do see people that'll put a blip through that they're there, and it'll show on one system, but it doesn't ripple through to the others. So, it happens. People still blip, and well, if that's what turns you on, that's fine. But if you want to be answered, do yourselves a favour, put a call through. And the other thing Colin and I were chatting about this morning is we're about due fairly soon to do another one of our ICQ get-togethers, and making it a very short time period where we can all get together and making it a different time zone every time doesn't necessarily work for everybody. What I'm going to suggest, and I really like your feedback on this one, so but the feedback thought I think we're looking at here is, how about we do what we call an activity day, and maybe we're on from 8 a.m. in the morning UTC till 8 p.m. Have a 12-hour session and call it an activity day. Now, I can't guarantee I'm going to be on the whole 12 hours, and there will be some of you probably don't want to talk to me. But if we do it as a 12-hour activity day where as many ICQ podcast listeners can talk to as many other IC podcast talk listeners, I think that might be a very good one. So, in fairness, guys, if you like that idea, just drop us an email and say yes or no. What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, sounds like a good plan. I mean, we've done something similar before in different sort of places, so I think it's something that's very possible. But as I say, guys, let us know what you think, because obviously doing this sort of stuff, it takes a little bit of time to pull together. So let us know if that's something you'd be interested in us doing, and as I say, we can certainly have a look at doing that from there for you. We're talking about people contacting and supporting us. Not only did Nesta contact us through the ICQ podcast website, but obviously we've got some fantastic donors to thank for this episode. So we'd like to thank Daryl McCarthy, VK6 Delta Mike Charlie, a Mr. D. Renton, and the Appledore and District Radio Club for their very kind donations to the ICQ podcast. If you found value from the show you've heard today, then the best thing we can suggest you do is to visit icqpodcast.com/donate. Turn that value received into a monetary figure and either choose one of the options that we've got there for you, or select your own, and say whatever you send our way keeps this show advert free, and keeps us producing hopefully what you find to be a wonderful, entertaining show. Many thanks again for the guys who joined us in the news roundtable as well. So many thanks to Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, and Leslie, Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, for taking part as the news roundtable. So we really do appreciate your contribution. Right, well, I think that just about wraps up episode 370 of the ICQ podcast. Now, as you know, I was in London last weekend, Dad, as well. Hopefully you remember me being there with you for the weekend. And if you look in the back of the cupboard, I've left some Jacob's chocolate salted caramel biscuits for you to give Mum with a cup of tea this afternoon. So I'd say have a rummage in there. There's some nice Irish chocolate biscuits there that I've left there for you in the back of the cupboard, and I say you can give their Mum one of those with a cup of tea. So I'll let you head off and get that sorted out.
Colin, you superstar, you. Yeah, it was a great weekend when you were over. We didn't do much radio, let's be honest, guys. We didn't do much radio, but we did do a fair number of things and had a really good, relaxing time. And, okay, Colin, I'll go and have a rummage, see if I can find them. And because I'm just about to go make your mum a cup of tea now anyway. So on that note, I'll say 73s to you. A big thank you to all our listeners and a big 73 to them as well.
No, we'll talk 73 is all, guys. We'll catch you all again in a fortnight's time. See you later.
So, 73.